So you mentioned LED walls.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about LED walls?
Yeah, let's do it.
So one of the bigger videos on the channel is, should I buy an LED wall or should I buy a projector?
Sure.
So my take on that is like, run a cost analysis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like LED walls are significantly more affordable now than they ever have been.
Sure.
But they're still pretty expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Use case is obviously the biggest thing. Like, what are you using it for? What are you trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had a church that was like, oh, we need an LED wall. I was like, well, why? Well, we have a lot of natural light. So I came into their space and I was like, yeah, you do have a lot of natural light. I'm like, but not so much natural light that like a nice projector couldn't overcome that. They're like, well, no, look at our projector. It looks terrible. And it was like a 15-year-old Vividtech rear projected like 4,500 lumen projector that looked like absolute trash. It might as well have been a ghost.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, I bet you a really nice Absen 12K laser projector for, you know, like 15 grand with like...
With a specific lens
right.
that doesn't have all the adjustment that your Vividtech does and doesn't do as good with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm
like, would probably knock this out of the park. So like we demoed it and they were like, yep, we love this. And like brought them from like a $60,000 LED wall down to like $15,000, $20,000 projector setup. Saved them a bunch of money. So I'll throw the question to you. When do you buy an LED wall versus a projector?
So I think you're right, cost analysis. But I also think, what is your use case? So coming from big church, we run both. But
that's actually a pretty new thing for you guys, relatively.
Relatively, yes. So when I started there, we were full projector. We had projector.
You started there in 17?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we have 3 iMag screens above our stage. We run Absen 12K lasers. Have since I've been there. They look good.
They used to be Barcos.
Yes.
No, Christie's.
They were Christie Roadsters. Yes. Yep. And then we had 2 Absen 12Ks on our stage, doing a stage screen for whatever we wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And about a year in, we bought an LED wall for our stage, really to move away from stage builds and set pieces and stuff that gets really old really fast, and the ability to simply reconfigure and, you know, pick a new image is really a win. Yeah. Now, I think in my opinion, if iMag is your primary and your room can handle it, projection will win 9 times out of 10. Because if your room isn't too bright for projection, the cost of a low pixel LED wall versus the sharpness you can get out of projection is going to be a win. And so like for us, we run both, and I don't see us going away from that.
Yeah.
Because our room is absolutely light controlled.
Yeah.
And the cost to rig and run power just to say, well, we have LED wall up there, is not worth it.
Right. Especially now, I think for me, the big turning point, because there was a brief time where LED wall came down enough. Laser projector wasn't a thing yet.
Yeah.
Where it was like, okay, let's do the cost analysis. This projector is going to pull this much power versus the LED wall. Okay, I'm going to have to replace this bulb approximately every 6 months.
Yep.
If I forget to shut it off, that's going to kill it even faster.
Yep.
Okay, what's the maintenance on this? Okay, so the life of an LED wall is probably, you know, I tell people about 7 years, depending on the level of quality that you buy. That doesn't mean you can't, you know, I've seen walls go for 15 years without any problems, but I think a safe number is 7 years. Projectors probably 4 to 7 on the bulb side of things.
Yep.
Before you're, you know, everything's kind of pooping out on you. And you could say that over the course of the life of that, LED wall would be about the same cost as a projector.
Sure.
At that point in time.
Sure.
With the invention of a laser projector, that went out the window.
Yep.
Because it doesn't matter if you forget to shut them off. You know, like, I mean, within reason, like you can't just leave it on 24 hours a day, every single day. But, you know, how many times did, you know, the volunteer forget to shut it off on Sunday morning? We come in on Monday morning and it's on and have to shut it off. You know, that doesn't upset me anymore because it's designed to be on 24 hours a day. So not a big deal. You know, I did a cost analysis for a church because they were like trying to decide. They wanted LED wall. I was suggesting laser projector, and they're like, well, how long will the laser last? And I'm like, well, it's rated for 20,000 hours. And they're like, well, how long is that? And I did like the the average, like the amount of time. And I was like, that'll last you 25 years. And they're like, whoa. And I'm like, because you're using it for like 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week. You know, like most churches are that way. Like not many churches are like that one where it's like you have a room that gets used 6 days a week for a minimum of 4 hours a day from a men's ministry, a women's ministry, a 55 plus ministry, leadership classes, practices, services, college, high school, you know, so on and so forth. Like how many, you know, services do you have in, you know, and obviously you know which room I'm talking about. So it's like, so that cost analysis has honestly been the biggest thing for me. Now I will say I have had, I've had churches that they're like, we need something that is like a grand diamond, you know, the physical look of LED wall versus projector is drastically different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I will say for modernization, like when you walk in and you see an LED wall hanging there instead of a projector, the modern version, you know, of that gives off is drastically different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, you know, when I started there in 2017, we had basically a double wide screen, so 216:9 side by side, and I hated it. I loved what it looked like when it was on. Yeah. But if we darkened the room and didn't have anything on it, there's just a white rectangle. Like it doesn't look right. Where an LED wall can absolutely just disappear into the black. Yeah. And so for that side, like if that's the goal, is it's a stage piece that can be used for whatever, but isn't primarily an IMAG device, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. LED wall all the way.
So let's talk about the next thing about LED wall.
Yeah.
Moray. Now, you guys are fortunate enough that your cameras have the capability of overcoming that.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Sure.
Most cameras, you know, some shutter angle stuff can be changed. It gets worse the cheaper of the LED wall you get. What do you tell people that are so like bent on getting an LED wall, but they're running, you know, $2,000 cameras that don't have the same capability that your higher end cameras have to be able to overcome that? You know, like, because you can go in, I mean, like anything, you can go in and you can buy, you know, like for a 16-foot by 9-foot wall, you can buy $100,000 version of that, and you can buy a $25,000 version of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, like, what do you do? How do you, like, Church A comes to you and says, Eric, we want to do this. We're going to do this. We're now just figuring out, like, which one do we do? What are the questions you ask them? What are the steps you walk through with them to, like, get them to land the correct plane? Even if there is going to be some level of moray because you can't afford the $100,000 version of this wall that won't have that problem. Yeah. But, you know, we didn't go with the $12 version. Or maybe we did go with the $12 version.
Sure. I mean, there's pros and cons to all of it, right? So the reality of it is we as people that are installing these things or buying these things, we have to ask the right questions. Right. And so in that scenario, really we have to look at the big picture of when it's all done, is the job actually done? Because if we just sell them, you know, X LED wall, right? You know, it might look great to the eye.
Could you boil it down to like 3 or 4 questions?
Sure. So what are your cameras? Okay. You know, get some specifics on those.
Okay, so, and what is that going to do? Why do we need to know that?
Shutter speeds, things like that, how much adjustment you really have. Right. Now, most LED wall processors have a decent amount of adjustment. And so, like, for me, half of it's on the processor, half of it's on the camera. Okay. So, what cameras you have, what your, like, biggest dream, how is this thing being configured?
Right.
Because just because I'm going to buy it and hang it in a 16:9 does not mean it's going to stay that way.
Right.
So making sure that, you know, I'm thinking back to a good example of we actually took some of our panels and hung them in the ceiling.
Okay.
And it looked really cool in person. On camera, the colors would never line up because we had some angled in a ceiling and then flat.
Oh, okay.
So in that instance, man, I wish I would have bought an LED wall that didn't have as big of a frame on it.
Yeah.
But you don't know that until you try it.
Right.
So if I would have been asked that question, yeah, we're probably going to do something stupid with it, like hang it from a ceiling.
Yeah.
So I'd ask that. I would also ask, what are you like? What's the infrastructure path that you guys are planning on using to make sure that that's as solid as possible?
Right. And when you say infrastructure, you're talking about
like if you're feeding everything through a switcher and
Okay.
it's going to be on a switcher, or you know what software are you gonna use to run it, because that can be a big cost too.
right.
You know, when you talk about a computer with a hefty graphics package on it, and then whatever software you want to use.
Right.
And then if it's being run through a switcher, and okay, well now we have another device that could add scaling and things like that.
And the time that goes into programming the backgrounds to make that look right.
Yep.
And the know-how how to do that
how
correctly.
turnkey are we going to try to make this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are all the questions?
That's where I would start.
Okay.
And budget, of course. I mean,
Yeah, budget.
What are you trying to spend? Because the reality of it is, if you have $1,000 cameras and you want a $100,000 LED wall.
And I will say this about budget. Everyone has a budget.
Yep.
Everyone knows what their budget is. I cannot tell you how many times I've had pastors go, well, we don't really have a budget, so let's just quote it and we'll go from there.
Someone in your organization has a budget.
The number one thing that happens is I go, oh, okay, cool. So from the information you've given me, because I asked all these questions, because I'm like, I don't want to just sell you a Cadillac to sell you a Cadillac.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. We'll come in here. This project's going to cost you $50,000.
Sure.
And they're like, oh my gosh, man, I was thinking it was going to be like $10,000 or $20,000. So you did have a budget number in mind.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's the number one thing. Immediately. Well, yeah, this is a lot more than what we were thinking. Well, you told me you didn't know what the cost was.
Mm-hmm.
You have an idea. You may think that the number's wrong, or you are afraid to go, oh, our budget's $20,000 because you're just going to use all $20,000. Well, the thing is that like if I don't know, most projects can go anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000 or more.
Well, and it's not just a budget to say this is what you can spend.
Right.
It's a budget to say this is what we are comfortable with.
Right.
Because, if somebody's going to say, man, I have $5,000 and I want, 4 16:9 LED walls. I can tell you that's not going to happen.
I'm just going to walk out of your facility.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that there's that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
Budgeting, trust in integrators and people you're buying from. There's so many in-depth conversations you have because if you don't trust the person enough to tell them listen, we have $50,000 for this project. We don't want to spend $50,000.
Yeah.
We will if we have to.
Yeah.
We want to spend 30.
Yeah.
If you can't trust your integrator with that kind of information, you shouldn't be working with them.
Yeah.
Again, that can be a whole deeper conversation we have, but just because we're talking budgets and stuff, I think that's important to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned, what are you going to do with it? I've had so many clients that go, we're never going to move this. We're never going to do it. And then 3 months in, hey, how do we move this?
Yeah.
Or the opposite. We're going to move this thing all over the place. And then it never moves. It's been in the same spot for 12 years. What would you have done differently now that you said that was a problem for you? You said with a different frame. Can you kind of go into that a little bit? Because there's a lot of people that they just don't understand any of this.
Sure.
Everyone has an LED wall. Should I have an LED wall? Because for a long time, I felt like everyone was just like, oh, well, yeah, everyone has an LED wall. I want the toy. But now that I've been in this for a lot longer and I've had a lot more conversations, a lot of times the question is everyone has it. Does that mean that that's the right tool?
Sure.
Okay, cool. Well, someone's going to be watching this and they're going to go, all right, so is this the right tool for me? What am I supposed to avoid because I don't want to run into these problems? there are a lot of people that are in that 1,000 to 2,000 person church that is
Yeah.
probably going to use this for set dressing, not just a display.
Yep.
What did you guys do that caused the problem?
Sure.
What was the choice, design flaw, and how would you avoid it if you were buying something today and that was the thing you wanted to do?
Sure. So the LED wall that we have is a 6 mil, and their cabinets they're about 30 by 30.
Okay. And you bought 6 mil because your room is very large.
Yep.
And you are probably 45 feet?
47 to the front row.
Okay. Yeah. Just for clarification.
Yep. to the back line of our stage that we rig everything from.
Okay.
And so the issue that we had was we decided to take 3 rows of LED wall, approximately 30 panels,
Okay.
and hang them from a 35-degree angle off the ceiling. And so...
Which, I mean, an LED panel will function like a TV. So, like, you stand off.
Yep.
It's going to change the way that you're perceiving it.
Yep. Now, talking about 6 mil panel, up close, doesn't look very good. It has a pretty good sized grate in front of it, or a mask, and that's really designed to just protect the pixels, so that, if something were to bump it, hit it, you're not hitting the pixels, you're hitting the frame that's in front of it.
Yep.
Now, because we hung them at a downward angle, you were seeing a lot of light reflection off of that mask or that grate that you're not normally seeing when you're more direct on.
Gotcha.
So because of that, on cameras were picking up some more of that reflection and less of the actual output.
Gotcha.
So it was great because there was no moire up top.
Right.
But
it's also far enough away.
Yeah. But the color representation on video did not match, no matter what we did.
And was that because of the protective shielding, or was that because of the angle that the LEDs were being able to be seen by cameras?
So it was we tested it. We took the shielding off of some of the panels, and it was entirely the shielding.
Okay.
So our the LED chip that's on our LED walls is designed to be much more of a wide than what the mask allows it to.
Gotcha.
So knowing that, it's all in the what you purchased.
Gotcha.
Right. Now, we didn't know that without doing that experiment, and for as long as we ran it, everybody was super happy with it outside of our video team.
Right.
Because
But is the video team ever happy?
Well, and that's the thing. In my position, my role, I am focused about the in-room experience.
Right.
And for them, it was great.
Yeah.
It was something totally different, off the wall, worked great for what we wanted it for. And in the end, that was a win.
Yeah.
For me, my team, my leadership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay, so how do you fix that problem? If you were to be buying LED wall today, because it sounds like you guys loved that look, but didn't stick with it long because of the problems.
Yeah. We ran it for quite a while, probably 8 months.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if you were to do it again, and you didn't have an LED wall, you're buying one today, what would you do different?
Test it in more configurations.
Okay.
So we did a product demo when we were looking at buying LED wall, and we brought them in, hung them vertically, and said, "Man, this looks good." Our sanctuary is really wide.
Yeah.
It's about 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And so,
like most large sanctuaries.
Yeah. And so we didn't really lose anything viewing angle wise, from outside front row pew to outside front row pew. And so that was what we did and said that was the win. And so our integration process, our install was very much based on that. Okay. So we're super blessed to have motors and a trust that whole system can ride up and down on for building it and reconfiguring it and all of that. So what I would do differently is I would test that differently. And then knowing that that's either hopefully a win and that test goes well, I would spend maybe a little less on LED wall and a little more on rigging.
Okay.
to be able to reconfigure more often, easier.
Right. So you say you bought 200 panels. I don't know how many panels you bought.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of buying 200 panels, you'd rather 150 and have more rigging.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, more motors or truss or battens, whatever you want that to be.
More ease of use.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Cool. So it's not necessarily like a mechanical change. Like, oh yeah, we bought the S10 and it clearly just can't tow what we needed to tow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more of like the S10 tows a lot of things, but then we just tried to tow something that was a little too heavy for it. You know,
yep. We found that limit,
right?
And that's cool. We know where that is, and so. Will we go back to that with these panels? No, probably not.
Right.
Or we will make it drastic enough that it works.
Right. Intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, so if we ran them, closer to a 45 degree,
gotcha.
Where that color representation doesn't matter because it's more of a top light.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. Would you say that there's a size, space, or congregation or anything like that where you go, if I ever walked into a church that was blank size and saw an LED wall, I'd probably want to throw up in my mouth because it's such a waste, or it just shouldn't be there?
That's a two-sided question because I think there are certain demographics that would maybe make me change my mind. So
when you say demographics,
so let me answer it by saying this. I think if you have 250 people, I'd be shocked if I walked in and saw LED wall everywhere.
Okay.
But if that church was, I don't know, in DC or LA or somewhere that has, a very wealthy group of people, I could potentially see it.
I have definitely found that the Brazilian culture values stage visual production over everything else. And I've seen them where they're literally like barely making audio happen and lighting happen, but they have not lighting, but like video happening, but like they're lighting and their video wall and it's like 100-person church. And you're like, I'm like, what? And I like had to have someone that was like someone I knew. They're like, okay, yeah. So like the culture here is, like this is the most important thing to them. They spent all the money there and they have zero regrets that, the sound guy can barely make the soundboard work because it's 45 years old, type thought process. And I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. Like, and I never really thought of it in that scenario. And then one of the other things that made me realize that too wasn't even a tech related thing. It was, I was talking with Mike Signorelli from V1 in New York. And he was talking about like how different growing up in the Midwest is because there's parking lots in all of our churches. Yeah. And like, he's like, people have to pay to get into New York City to come to church and they have to pay to park and like all these things. And he's like, you have to pay to go to church in New York City unless you live in like that downtown area. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty like, that was pretty eye-opening too. And like both of those things kind of happened probably within like a couple months of each other. Sure. Where it was like, okay, cool. Like I had to take in cultural like differences, and so it's like when you're on those tech pages where it's like, oh, you're stupid for buying that, or like you shouldn't have. It's like, well, there's a level of like cultural differences because you're like you said, like someone in LA versus someone in Grand Blanc, Michigan, right? Like pretty drastically different. 45 member church there versus there. The money's probably significantly different, like you mentioned. Yep. And the culture's just different. So yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I also think just to touch on that, I think a lot of, at least in my experience, a lot of tech staff and even leadership, pastoral leadership and folks that control money in churches, I think a lot of times LED walls can be a status symbol at some rate. Yeah. Like, man, all these big churches that we're looking to, whether it's Elevation or Church on the Move or whoever, they're running LED walls. Man, I got to have it. Yeah. And, like you said about with Brazilian culture, like audio, you don't see it. Yeah. So why are we spending on it? Like it works. Right. Where man, this thing just looks so much better.
Yeah.
We're a visual culture.
Yeah.
You know, at least I would say that in America.
I
We're
think
a
so.
visual culture. And so we're going to pour more money into this.
Yeah.
Where it's not always the best use case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good. Dude, I think that's our time. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I like this. I like that we kind of like shrunk this down from 5 people, like, you know, like just the 2 of us.
Mhm.
Occasionally we'll probably have like a third on there, but dude, yeah, you're awesome, dude.
Appreciate it.
So
It's a pleasure.
sweet.